Welcome to CSP 340, Chapter 9, Part 2. In the first part, we looked at some facts about autism, we looked at the definition of autism, and we began to look at characteristics. The next video I'm going to show you is a mother talking about her child who has autism and a fairly significant functional disability. She uses the word stimming to talk about self-stimulation, and she talks about the word sibbing, meaning self-injurious behavior.
Are you watching the show? Do you like the show? Think that's funny? I think he's actually watching it and laughing at it. Now this behavior that you see, this is not sip. It's the same thing he does when he is sipping, doing the self-injurious behavior. That is how people in the autism community, we've been around all these behaviors so long that we've actually turned a noun into a verb. We call it sibbing. It's funny, huh? I guess there's a new verb, to sib. The act of self-abusing. So, yeah, this is interesting. That's a self-stim that he was doing right there, as opposed to an actual sib. Now he's focusing. He's focusing on, look at the look on his face. He's highly focused there. Now notice the highly focused. He's not stimming, he's not sipping. And I don't ever show them any kind of videos, I try not to, unless they have something meaningful on them. Like, I don't just show them random, idiotic things that have no purpose. These things are actually teaching you something. So I think educational videos is pretty much what I feel as a mom is going to be pertinent to his learning, and if he learns anything at all, and maybe he's learning something right now. For all I know, he's thinking. Notice the positioning too. This is very common. The way that he's sitting. Hi, James. Are you enjoying your show? Do you like the show? He's got that kind of not really puzzled look, but just a look of intent, like he's trying to figure out what this is he's watching now. He's probably memorizing all of it. He just can't tell us. You're smart, Jamie. I know you're. So here's how I spend some of my afternoons under a shade tree in the car with my autistic son. As you can see, I live a very exciting life. I sit in the car and I read in my driveway because he's obsessed with sitting in the car. He doesn't care what car it is, any car. We could be in a grocery store and he wants to walk out, and so I'm going to sit here again. I have my cell phone, some books to read, exciting reads like, self-injurious behavior. That's always really fun. So, yeah, this is for all the moms out there and dads that know exactly what I'm talking about. The obsessions. How you're on. Hi, James. It's been an hour and 48 minutes, James. Do you think maybe we could exit the vehicle? I'd like to maybe go inside now. Is that all right?
The next video we're going to look at has to do with the difference between tantrums and meltdowns. Did you know there was a difference?
The difference between a meltdown and a tantrum is significant. A meltdown is an involuntary reaction to overwhelming stressors, be they cognitive or be they sensory. Sensory would be going into a store, and no offense to Walmart's, like Walmart's, at Christmas time, and all the sensory hitting you and being forced. And I have seen parents try to desensitize their kids by dragging them into Walmart's and having to put up with all the sensory. And what it is, it's not, your brain says too much. Because we have the heightened five senses, your senses are always constantly reacting. The smell, the sight, the hearing, everything. That finally it says enough and it just has to run. It's involuntary. Cognitive sometimes is from cognitive overload, not getting understandable questions answered. We'll see, maybe, if you're good. And we try our best and we get nowhere, and then boom, that happens. A tantrum is a tantrum. A tantrum is a willful manipulation of behavior to get an end desired result. It requires cognitive functioning. In a meltdown, always, you'll have some degree of cognitive dysfunctioning. That's one of the keys of distinguishing between the two. I describe, what to look for, the differences between a cognitive, meltdown and say, a tantrum. And one of the things is that the cognitive dysfunction, we get so stressed out that we can't even think straight, and it decreases. And a tantrum, any child, whether you're autistic or not, will have a tantrum when they want something their way. And you handle that completely different. You handle a tantrum, ideally, with a consequence, be it what it may for that child, be it something that they understand, taking away a privilege or whatever, letting them know that behavior is unacceptable. I actually did a consultation for a young boy I was called in, and they didn't know whether it was a meltdown or tantrum. And I just spent, and it was nonverbal, and I spent maybe 20 minutes with that child. And it was really, really quick to see that child was having a tantrum, because I watched. And what he would do is he'd throw himself on the ground, and it was really hard. But I was looking for cognitive functioning. I was looking for some sort of, reaction in his brain trying to manipulate behavior. And he was having his meltdown in front of the people. Watching them watching him. So I said, step aside, and I stepped in, I said, just watch. And I turned my back, and I just crossed my arms, and I just completely ignored him. And he screamed and ranted and raved. And after 5 minutes, when he realized that I couldn't see him, he slowly moved his meltdown, right to my line of sight. And I turned again, and he moved it again. So I knew immediately it was not a meltdown, it was a tantrum. Because
the next thing that we're going to look at is curriculum instruction. How do we teach kids who have autism? The first thing we're going to talk about is teaching communication skills. As soon as I can get this thing to go where it needs to go, we're going to teach communication skills. We have what we call augmentative communication. And augmentative communication is for children that don't have verbal language. So we can use aided communication, which would be the use of equipment or tools. So we can make picture boards, or we can use an iPad. There are apps on an iPad, or we can use an electronic device. We can use switch technology. The advantage to aided communication is that it puts the communication in a way that other people can understand it. Unaided are things like sign language, gestures, body language. Advantage is the child always has that with them. Disadvantage is that other people may not understand the sign language, the gestures, or the body language. The next thing we're going to look at is a range of ways that children who don't have high cognitive functioning, or children with autism, how they communicate. The most conventional and most explicit are speech, written language. Then we have picture boards or word boards are more conventional, explicit than sign language. Then we got conventional gestures like waving and pointing. Echolalia, which is just repeating something over and over again. I can remember my nephew when he was 3 standing in front of the refrigerator going, I need. Physical manipulation, where they grab you by the hand and pull you where they want you to go to show you what they need. Facial expressions, proximity, and then we begin to get into the least conventional and least explicit, idiosyncratic speech, where children make up words that mean something to them. Idiosyncratic gestures like flapping their hands, screaming. Self-injurious behavior is a communication form, as is aggression. Also in this category of communication, we look at what our purposes are for communication. We communicate to increase participation in the classroom, work, community, and home, to address the IEP, to work and personal goals, to support timely and interactive communication, to provide meaningful language to the recipient, to support language and literacy learning, to encourage successful day-to-day, face-to-face, real-time interaction, and to be age level appropriate, and to provide positive behavior supports. The next thing we're going to look at is social behavior, and we're going to watch a film on what we call applied behavior analysis for social behavior.
Since we know social skills programming is so important and critical in a good ABA program, let's talk about some readiness indicators. Now, these indicators are not necessities, but they are just areas where if your student is showing these skills, social skills programming is probably perfect for them. The first is the ability for the student to follow basic instructions. We call this instructional control. So if you're going to work with social skills training, meaning you'll have other students around your student, you want to make sure that your student can actually respond to instructions, at least some minimal instructions. Sit down, give me 5, look over here. Second, eye contact. Now, this eye contact may be with just an adult initially, but you do want the student to be able to look at another when they're speaking. The third item is low levels of inappropriate behavior. This could be low levels of aggression or low levels of self-stimulatory behavior. You want the student to be able to manage their behavior if they're going to be interacting with other peers. There are multiple reasons for this, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the module. Another good indicator is the student's ability to request. If they're going to be in a social environment with other peers, you at least want to know that they can request for items or activities with an adult initially, so that we can then work on having them request with a peer. Now, this requesting could take the form of vocal behavior or the words they use. It could also be signs or pictures or an assistive technology device. But some skill in requesting is usually a good sign or a good indicator of readiness for social skills programming. Next, the ability to imitate. Remember, we talked about observational learning. Well, you want to make sure that your student has some ability to imitate an adult before you put them in a social environment. Lots of what we're going to be asking them to do is watch what your peers are doing and do the same thing. So some skills in imitation are also a good indicator. Lastly, the ability to play with toys appropriately.
So these skills lead us to a point where we can do what we call an ABA. In ABA, what we're going to do is target a social behavior, then we're going to directly teach the skill, then we're going to facilitate the generalization of that skill to other settings with role play, then we're going to help that child transition that skill to everyday settings, and then we're going to check for social validity, which means, is it what that community considers to be appropriate? In part 3 of chapter 9, we will continue to talk about instruction, and then we will also talk about some special considerations when we think about autism.